Conversations with Selwyn. Thank you for joining us this evening, and those of you who are joining us for the first time, a very special thank you. CWS is about having conversations with people about their journey and how they are using their gifts and talents to help others. So I'm always looking for people who are doing extraordinary things or doing things extraordinarily well because I believe that we are never more connected than when we share our stories. And one of the reasons I encourage others to share their stories and not only to glorify their successes, but to talk about their challenges and how they might have overcome some of them, how often they got up when they fell, is so that for those who are listening, but especially our youth, can draw from these experiences and imagine a young person stepping beyond their limitations or beyond their challenges simply because they listen to you and one day becoming the next head of state or someone who discovers a vaccine that saves millions of lives or someone who stops a genocide. We never know. And so it is important for us to give beyond ourselves. Our guest tonight is a daughter of our soil, Leslee Will Sankofa. Leslee has an MA from Open University in Image and Visual Culture, completed at Nottingham University, Art History in October 2011. Presented dissertation on life and work of forgotten 60s and 70s West London painter Roy Kabu. Postgraduate certificate in education at Institute of Education, June 1992. Specialisms, art and design, textiles and RE. Submitted papers on the art of the Chinese, Vietnamese, both people, the relevance of African religions to the faith curriculum, BA honors, BA gained in printed and woven fashion textiles, June 1979. Thesis written on the history of the Notting Hill Carnival. This was later the basis for lectures as an outreach tutor at the Commonwealth Institute. It was also the central theme of multidisciplinary craft workshops and booklets commissioned by their education department. And there are many more, but I would like to close by saying that Leslee has also been entered, her work has been entered in many exhibitions. So I'll take a short break, and on the other side, I'll introduce you to Leslee Will Sankofa. We are back. The lovely lady next to me is Leslee Will Sankofa. Leslee, good evening.
Good evening, Selwyn.
And welcome to CWS, Leslee.
Thank you.
Can you hear me clearly?
Yes, I can.
Wonderful. Leslee, I understand that you were born in England to Guyanese parents and grew up in Guyana. What can you tell us about your early years at age 9 and 15 and who you became at 21?
Well, we returned to Guyana when I was about 5. So when I was 9, it would have been a year or so before I went to Bishop's High School in Guyana. Those were important years for me because little did I know it, but I was about to enter a very formative experience of my life. Later on, at 15, I realized that Guyana and Guyanese encompass various perspectives and would provide me with the many structures I would need later on with which to cope with life.
And who did you become at 21?
At 21, by then I had lived a bit in Zambia, East Africa, and had returned to London to go to college. At 21, I have to think carefully about when that was and do lots of additions. Would have been slightly before I'd been introduced to the Notting Hill Carnival community. However, I was based in the North London community of Finsbury Park, which was very Afro-centered at the time. In fact, the Black Panthers of Britain was based there, some of the Black Panthers, and I was exposed to a lot of the politicized black community at 21.
Leslie, you mentioned Bishop's High School in Guyana, and I want to bring it up not only because we both went there, but also because it was where I met some of the most brilliant and wonderful people I have ever known. Did you enjoy school? What was your favorite subjects, and are there any principles you learned as a student there that will still resonate with you?
Well, obviously, when I was experiencing, I didn't realize how important it was. But I very much enjoyed going to an all-girls school. My favorite teachers were my art teacher, Mrs. Brookhagen, my history teachers, my English teachers. In fact, I was very much a follower of the arts. I loved music as well with Miss Peters. And I'd say it was a totally enjoyable experience.
When you think of Guyana, you think of growing up in Guyana. What kind of aromas, fragrances, and sounds, including music, come to mind?
Aromas of Guyana, the smell of sugarcane and molasses, of course,
Hmm.
the smell of the many, many curries that we always ate. I remember always, my father always saying there were 8 different kinds of curries, and I definitely those smells, the smell of breadfruit, sour sops, souries, all the fruits and delicious meals that characterize Guyanese culture.
And the music, the sounds, what do you remember?
Well, of course, the Santa Fe Band, Mother Sally performing at Christmas. Of course, the songs of the insects, the 6 o'clock bee, the birds, the cascades. Many of these are venerated in my mom's poems and plays. But of course, no Guyanese could actually remember their childhood without remembering those.
Hmm. So what do you miss most about, let's say, being 13 or 14?
I miss the liming, as we used to call it then. I remember riding around by my friends in the Naira Street. Hi, Chauncey and Edward, if you're listening. And basically liming and hanging out and enjoying people's company. And remember, we didn't have televisions in those days, so we very much made our own activities,
Hmm.
and it was thoroughly enjoyable.
And how have your parents influenced influenced who you are today? And what particular words of wisdom do you remember from both of them?
Well, I remember always being directed to occupy myself in specific areas. One day we would go to my aunt, and for example, we would do needlework and sewing and stuff like that. And I was interested in textiles later on. Another day you might go to music club or music lessons. Another day you might do sport. And I don't think it was particularly my parents. I think that's the way Guyanese as a whole brought up their kids to get the most out of the environment and to
Hmm.
interact with all these various activities.
So outside of them, who would you say uh, had a great impact on your life outside of your parents?
Outside of my parents, it's definitely Miss Brookhagen, Marjorie Brookhagen, my art teacher at Bishop's High School.
Hmm.
I went back to see her when I returned to Guyana in 1994, and she was still as interesting as ever, uh, surrounded by her lovely oil paintings, encouraging me to keep up textiles, and she's quite insightful. I remember she went to Brazil several times and talked to me personally about the Brazilian culture, and I found that very interesting.
Tell us about your first steps in art.
I don't know. I belong to a group of people at Bishops who are very creative. I'd even dare say that far more creative than I was and very good at art. But my mother is a very creative person, and she persevered in pushing me in the artistic direction, whilst my father, who is a well-known lawyer, had hoped that I, as his eldest daughter, that I would choose law. But my mother won the battle with her pushing me to art lessons and basically exposing me to her creative world.
I know she taught, and there are many bishops, women who told me about her, mentioned her. She was on my show as well, and I really enjoyed the conversation with her. What a trip down memory lane. Um, does teaching come naturally to you, and how much of your mother's style of teaching do you recognize in yourself, if there's any?
Well, I wouldn't be sure because she did never taught me formally.
Hmm.
But my mother's father, my grandfather, was a head teacher, and my father's father was a teacher. I never wanted to go into teaching, but inevitably artists become teachers because, hey, not all of us are going to be decathlon. However, what I recognized later on in Britain in schools, the pupil teacher technique of getting the able pupils to teach other pupils, um, teaching through drama, identification of yourself in your work. Those are things I picked up subconsciously through my education at Bishop's. It wasn't something that I was consciously taught at teacher training. Many of my friends tell me now that the reason why I survived as a teacher is because I had all these strategies to hand that I picked up in my childhood in Guyana, not consciously but subconsciously.
So, talking about that, how would you say your childhood experiences in Guyana influenced your art?
Well, certainly they influenced my art in every way. Because though my art is Afrocentric and Afro-centered, I, alongside with my father and my friends, did attend all the cultural events of all the other various types of people in Guyana. For example, I remember for independence, I had to actually teach a group of Boy Scouts a Chinese dance, and I was really proud of that, and I enjoyed that. And I did it, and I thought I did it very well. Also, every year, my father and his colleagues who were Hindus, we would go to Asian festivals. And of course, our neighbors were important Hindus in the community, and they would have celebrations at their houses. So I was very exposed to that. Then there were visits to Brazil. My mother went, my mother's friend, Mrs. Bruhagen. So I was exposed to Brazilian culture, not through my mother, but through our neighbors as well. So the genuine multicultural makeup of Guyana meant that all of us were very privileged and exposed to other cultures in some depth, not just superficially.
You
And
know,
I think that really worked.
you know, when we speak of art and Guyana's art, I can't um, I cannot I cannot not mention those like Donald Luck, who as a is a is the father was the father of a good friend of mine, but he was a father to many of us. I remember the many hours of conversations, and it was never boring because there's always something to learn. Donald Luck said to me once, he said, when he looked at my work, my art, and what I did, the type of colors that I use in my art and use in web development, and he said to me that the reason why I chose those colors is because of the colors that I was accustomed to or I saw when I was growing up. Does that apply to you, Leslie? Do you see that theory in your work?
Very much so. And when I went to Nigeria, West Africa for the first time, with my collection of designs, that's the first thing some of the clients I approached would say. But your colors aren't West African. Your colors are South American or they're East African. And what I thought might have been African, because I was naive enough to things that were African were of one personality
Mm-hmm.
could be perceived as work that was highly influenced by other cultures, our unique Guyanese cultural personality. So I know what Donald Locke is talking about. He was saying you're choosing colors that reflect your unique Guyanese-ness.
Mm-hmm.
And it does exist. It is true.
It is true.
We are, yeah.
You mentioned
We,
Africa, so I wanna leap there for a moment. Uh, how was your work influenced by your stay in Zambia, West Africa, and how has your stay in Zambia shaped you as a woman?
well, I only spent about 1 year in Zambia, but it did shape me. I was exposed to diasporic um, expressions of the African personality. For example, I remember a really famous performer and poet called Aquila Simpaza, who was actually the first Rastafarian I'd ever seen, not in the Caribbean, but in Africa. Uh, Dennis Williams, who is also of the era of Donald Locke and Aubrey Williams, the great art historian, wrote a book about other leopards, about how we're leopards, but when we go to another country, i.e., in my case, Zambia, we're very much aware of how alike, but also how different we are.
Mm-hmm. You
So that was my experience. I felt like another leopard, as Dennis Williams, other leopards, you know,
and and
spoke
and
about.
and you also lived in Nigeria. Uh,
No, I didn't live there. I had friends there, and I went there quite a few times in the 80s.
oh, I see. I see. How did Zambia remind you of Guyana, or did it?
Hmm, well, one of the important things is that we have to recognize that not many countries have Africans in power.
Mm-hmm.
And Zambia was a highly resourced place in terms of its copper, yeah?
Yes.
And there was a confidence and sense of success and education when I was there in the early 70s. Remember, Guyana had sent a group of stenographers and skilled people out to Zambia as well. So I was a part of a community. At that time, my father was the ambassador to Zambia. So I would have been a part of a community of people in Zambia who were making links with the Zambian people as well.
I have this might be a two-part question, but let me ask you the first part. How did the women of Zambia teach you about art, about womanhood, and about life?
Well, even now, one of my friends from Zambia who's here in England, they were the first people that I met that endorsed European fashion, a European fashion sense, and using African fabric. They were very much about reflecting the African personality in what you did and what you ate. And also they were astute business women. These are the group of people that I met when I went there.
I want to ask you something about how you were raised. Give us a glimpse into your family, your early years. Here's a mother who's very creative, very passionate about her work. A father, brilliant attorney, also an ambassador. You having attended Bishop's High School, a school that is known for its excellence, not only in academics, but what you're taught and the way teachers approach teaching you. Being molded by these forces or influenced by these factors, what do you think when by the time you got to Zambia, what do you think this package, this Leslie Wills at the time, what did you think you would have brought to that environment, and what would the women in Zambia who you interacted with would have learned from you?
Oh God, a very complicated question. As a teenager there, I was 19 when I arrived in Zambia.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly learning is a two-way process. Uh, One thing I do remember is that walking down the Central Avenue and being asked to model, I really am self-conscious about anything to do with modeling and the visual. But I did a stint of modeling. I was put in a newspaper, so I was a part of their growing sense of awareness of Africans from the outside. I was from Guyana and they were from East Africa. At that time, remember in the late 60s, 70s, um, African beauty in the diaspora was becoming celebrated. But I wasn't conscious of it, and I'm very self-conscious about things like that. Nobody's really conscious about their upbringing as they're living and growing. And yes, it was a brilliant experience for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's only in retrospect I can look back and see what I gained from it. You know, at the time when you're living it, you don't see it as well.
You have this humble disposition. Was that instilled by your parents in your childhood?
I don't think so. I just think it's a part of who I am. I mean, I I don't know if I'm humble. I read a lot and I still read a lot, and I'm strangely a mix between being a very introverted person
Mm-hmm.
to being a very social person. But I think the real me is quite introverted.
What currently inspires you, and which other artists do you admire and why?
I'll tell you what, yeah, I admire, first of all, I can go on forever about that. I admire Aubrey Williams, the Guyanese artist, Donald Locke, who you've mentioned. Uh, I admire Marjorie Bruhagen, whom I've mentioned before. I could go on forever because there's so many very good artists out there. At the moment, I am preoccupied with working on about two or three themes simultaneously. Because I have a personal document book that documents things that I like as I see them, and drawings and collages. At the moment, I'm very interested in African women and their role in prehistory and current ideas about them being the initiators of all civilization and having walked the world for 3 million years. Some people will be familiar with these ideas, but there's been a lot of current research into cave art and drawings that have shown up all around the world in places like Spain and France and Pakistan and Africa, in which measurement of stencils of palm prints and the way the artwork is executed indicates that they were predominantly done by women and that the women were hunters too. And while men may have gone out and done the kill, women dragged the carcasses of the animals back home. Basically, that women existed and were able to conceive radically in a sense where it was conceived, and it was only until much later that men came into being. I know this is controversial and some people might not like the idea, but I am researching this and I've done a lot of drawings around this because this is going to be one of my themes for my next art exhibition.
You know that you went there. I am curious though. You said women were here long before us, before anyone else,
Yeah,
until the mankinds came.
yeah.
And in your research, what do you think that women brought What do you think women brought into the world before the mankind's came?
Well, they certainly traveled from Africa, where the original woman is supposed to have lived, way out into Asia and populated the world. So certainly that's what they did.
Mm-hmm.
They brought their intuition,
Yes,
their psychic sense,
yes.
and lots of the attributes that are now lost, but which we characterize as being special to women and African women. You know, the sense of medicine and so on, the ability to heal. I'm a bit shy about talking about this because I'm still working on it.
That's okay.
But,
That's okay.
but I am not the only. This is not sort of my special thing. In fact, a well-known writer, Doris Leslee, has written a book about the cleft, and the cleft is a rock on which the women that she writes about killed any male child they may have conceived. And it talks about a community of women, and there are people that talk about this
Mm-hmm.
and about the ability for women to fertilize themselves in the past. This is called parthenogenesis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, insects do it, reptiles do it, and apparently we did it too.
I think
African women.
I think there's an insect that the ancient Egyptians revered that is known for doing that. I forgot the name of it. A bug that ancient Egypt's revered that was known for um, fertilizing
Self-fertilized.
themselves. Yes, I forgot the name of it. But talking about women, who in your mind is the black woman, and what is she to you, and why not only she, but all of us should respect and revere her?
Well, you know, Michelle Obama is a fine example. And Oprah, though some people might find that controversial, well, the black woman is the foundation of all culture, the transmitter of culture, and she is behind all the powerful black men. She's the queen mother, you know, the progenitress.
Hmm.
Whenever I do the theme of women and black women, when we had a carnival band, we did the Black Madonna. People from all over the world whom we not personally associated with would travel to come to be in our band. Such is this belief in the original strength and spiritual power of the black woman.
And
So it's not a theme that I have invented, it's just a theme that I keep endorsing and around which many, many people are united.
how has your work developed since you began, and how do you see it evolving in the future?
Well, I have been so fortunate because not only through carnival bands and themes, but through my textile designs, which I sold commercially, I have been able to exclusively produce abstract African-centered work based on fruits and vegetables from the Caribbean, work that expresses my own sense of identity and our own sense of culture. And I've actually been able to live by selling this and doing this. So I have been very fortunate because I have not had to compromise on that level.
Hmm. Tell us about your experience as a teacher, and how do you use art to bring your points across?
Well, what I do is individually resource the groups that I teach in art. Sometimes I teach history and sometimes I teach religion. And it seems as though what I do is so successful that I have the students rebelling against me. For example, I remember teaching in history in Newark in a predominantly white school in which the kids rebelled because they wanted to do roots and they wanted to just African American history. And I think they complained about me and they got their way and they sincerely thought it was their idea that they should study African American history, not mine.
So I,
So I, yes,
I'm sorry. What history were you about? Were you trying to teach
I
them?
was just there to teach general history, British history,
Oh,
European history, and they decided on Friday they were doing African American history. And one of the pupils, and it wasn't the top set, one of the pupils had the video of Roots, and they started with use that as a starting point. And such is, I think, the link between the things that I do while teaching art and history and religion is that they owned it so much. They thought it was their idea to study this and do it, not mine. I thought that was really amazing.
that's
And I said,
amazing. That is.
really? And I said, oh, miss, that's all we're doing. We're not doing anything else. And I thought that was really good.
And how did that
Uh,
make you feel?
hmm?
How did that make you feel? Did you
Well, that made me feel good because I didn't even want to teach history, but I was actually told by the department, you're going to have to do it. You're teaching history because the kids like you, and I know you're a qualified art teacher and you qualified to teach RE, but they want you to teach them history, and that's it. I did it. Huh?
I want to ask you one more question before we take a break. If you could eavesdrop your parents telling us, well, if you could eavesdrop your parents and your husband telling a stranger about you or what they think about you, what do you think your mom would say? What do you think your dad would say? And what do you think your husband would say about you?
Okay. I'm not sure. Uh, I think my mom might say something like, make sure you tell them about Mothasali and the rituals from Guyana that you've expressed in the Carnival Band. My mother is very much a promoter of my artistic ability.
Mhm.
My father might say Leslie has many secrets. She's very social when she wants to, but she doesn't tell everybody everything. But he would say. And my husband, his name is Akin Sankofa, and Sankofa means looking back to your culture. And he really has influenced me a lot.
Mhm.
And he might say that, I'm too nervous about things.
Wonderful. Leslie, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we are back with the lovely Leslie Wills, Sankofa. Leslie, what advice would you give to aspiring textile artists?
Um, Market and the technology has changed so much. But the first thing I would definitely say is take every single opportunity you get and act on it. Don't wait for things to happen to you. You make them happen.
Tell us about a piece of work you have fond memories of and why.
Well, I have fond memories of, and it was one of my bestsellers, something called the Zambian Marks design, which is a furnishing design based on two Zambian masks carved out of balsa wood. They were oversized masks done to a scale that really isn't acceptable in Britain in terms of what people wear every day. However, they went on to be bestsellers in futon shops, in stores like John Lewis and worldwide. And basically that just goes to show that work that's associated with memory and Africa has got a market.
Hmm.
Black art, really. We must never feel that if we like something, you can be sure there's going to be a community out there somewhere or a market that feels the same way because we're a part of a sort of spiritual community.
I like that. Can you repeat that again?
All I'm saying is that we must develop what we like from within ourselves. And in my case, my oldest, most favorite design was one based on Zambian masks. Because as artists and designers, we must remember that what we choose is going to reflect not just ourselves, but the community out there. And if we like it, there are going to be very many people like us who feel that way too.
Thesis written on the history of the Notting Hill Carnival, which formed the basis for lectures as an outreach tutor at the Commonwealth Institute. Why the Notting Hill Carnival? Why such an emphasis?
Well, of course, it's not being brought out, but I was born in the Notting Hill area. I was born in 17 Old Saints Road, which is a very hub and the centre of the mangrove community in Notting Hill. Later on, when I arrived back in Britain, one of the first community experiences I had was taking part in a carnival band there. I wrote my thesis and tried to document the living stories of people who made masks at Notting Hill, because they were my story. It was my story too. Luckily, I had access to the men who made the masks and the women, and I could tell it from a first-person perspective as well as a third-person perspective. Tell the story of Notting Hill. I don't know if I mentioned to you, there's a book published as well, The Art of Notting Hill. There's been a book, a coffee table photographic book by Marcel Noble and myself that was published based on the Notting Hill Carnival. I've written so much based on Notting Hill Carnival. I'm almost bored with it now.
What do you enjoy most about Notting Hill, the Notting Hill Carnival? You were the leader of a carnival band, weren't you, or aren't you?
Yes, I was. I helped founded a band with my friend Betty Campbell, who was also a textile designer, and she went back to Jamaica, and the band continued with a group of us, including the Sylvester family and my friend Debbie Eno. But for all intents and purposes, I was the lead designer of that band for 17 years.
History teaches us that when women are in positions of power, everyone benefits and their communities prosper. What are your thoughts on such an idea?
Definitely, because having a carnival band does mean a lot of personal sacrifice. Of course, I remember spending all my student grant on just equipment for music and to make us mobile. We didn't always get financial assistance. We funded things ourselves. But hey, we did it successfully. And it definitely is about women getting together and with men, with the help of men, because there were many men involved, and actually being the hub of that community.
You're passionate about black culture and Africanness. How would you convey that passion and its message to a group of young students?
Well, what I do is I do it subconsciously. I just build a curriculum which involves them researching. Like I might say, let's do women through the ages. I wouldn't say African women, you know. I would say to my student, year 10, I'd say one of the topics you could do, you don't have to do it, is women through the ages. And I would show them stuff from different women or stuff from different men, from different cultures. And then, because of the exclusion from the curriculum of our past and our special strengths, very many people, including English white people, would gravitate towards the African option because they have been so starved from it. So I was able to build a curriculum in textiles and in art long ago, and even recently by simply providing an array of choices and asking students to research them and then settle for what they found most interesting.
Oh, that's
But
that's.
and it always worked, always.
Could you lean back just a little bit? I think right. Yes. Yes. So we can get the whole of you in the frame, your whole face. Okay. Go ahead. You were saying something about.
Yes, well, I think we spoke about this before. We spoke about the fact that, or you highlighted it, about the fact that art is always based around issues of identity, memory, spiritual escapism, and how we're viewed,
Yes.
imagery, and how we viewed our bodies, and so on. And once you prevent these concepts or issues and you encourage people to go and do their own research, they will invariably come up with certain kinds of answers.
Leslie, give us a glimpse of the research you did into some of Britain's 70s black artists.
Okay, so when I returned from East Africa to Britain, I was rebelling against my father's desire for me to be a lawyer and trying to get into art college at the time. I found a strong creative world here, and in North London, where I was based, there was a Cascade Centre, which was well known because of the work of people like Errol Lloyd, Emmanuel Jegede, and they invited myself and my friend Betty Campbell to go there and do workshops and silkscreen with South African women. Little did I know that that group of people that I was working with would become artists later on, well-known artists. But I started in the 70s working with Betty at the Cascade, doing silkscreen design with South African women. There was an artist there called Roy Kabu. He did the set design. And when I did get into art this college, I actually began to notice that his work was attaining a lot of popularity in the mainstream.
Mm-hmm.
His work was very spiritualist and very Rastafarian. And you must remember, Selwyn, this was a pre-Bob Marley thing. This was before 75.
Mm-hmm.
I was given essays to write at college as we are. And this is just an English college, English art college. And I used exclusively black examples. Roy Kabu, Dennis Williams, I quoted, and so on. And the tutors gave me the highest possible grade. And I thought, wow. I expected them to say, well, that's it, we'll throw you out, you're a rebel. They didn't say that at all. Because I was really upset, actually, because my contemporaries from Nigeria and so on, they would spend all their time trying to research doors and shoes and so on. And here was I, just highlighting the black artists in the community I knew, and I was getting good grades for this. I wasn't getting good grades in the other parts of the course. You know, they were being very difficult about drawing, because they didn't understand abstract art.
Mm-hmm.
But they were actually encouraging me to make these comparisons and do this research on community artists. Anyway, in the course of my research and my living experiences, I began to see how much we influence other cultures and how the work that we do is adopted by the mainstream. Roy Kabu, who is now dead and who I did the most recent research on, he was also a steel pan player. He was also a karate expert. He was also a mystic. And he had a core community around him on what he did. And what we were taught at Hornsey College of Art then was that artists shouldn't be specialists, they should be multidimensional. So people like Adam Ant and a lot of famous English pop stars were also going to college at the same time. But the whole idea was that Roy Kaboo, an African artist, and people who are multidimensional are the true artists. That's why my examples fitted into the framework that they want to encourage. There was even a strike and a revolution at that college for 1 year. I didn't realize it was special because of that. But it was around this idea that art is multidisciplinary and multidimension.
You you
Something that you'd be familiar with now, but that was the time I went to art college in the first instance.
that same Roy Cabu, you did a dissertation on him.
Yeah.
What did you learn about yourself during that process?
I learned that in identifying with Roy Kaboo's invisibility and his namelessness, because that was the name of my research, I was actually pinpointing what was happening to myself. That the black women artists of that era, my contemporaries like Betty Campbell, Desiree Adams, they too were becoming invisible and nameless.
And your you have participated in numerous exhibitions. Of which is your favorite and why?
Well, all artists or creative people say the last piece of work they did was their favorite. So the last, I had a small exhibition here in Nottingham called Mammy Water at the Crocus Gallery. And because it's the last exhibition, I'll say that's my favorite. Because I won a competition.
Oh, congratulations.
Having won this competition, galleries can be really expensive and it can be really difficult, but I won the right to have the space and put my work on show and get support for it. So I enjoyed that exhibition. And when my mom came up and she saw it, she said, that exhibition was you. You weren't, you know. And it basically looked at the beliefs of fair maids and mermaids and women of the sea and the whole culture of worshipping the half woman, half serpent or half woman, half fish that many people in certain parts of Africa and Haiti and Brazil worship. And Guyana, my mother has very many stories celebrating the worship of the fair maid or Mammy Water. We also did that theme at Notting Hill and it was very successful.
Do you remember your first exhibition
Yes.
and how you felt?
Uh, I never really secure about any of this. I suppose the first exhibition was the when you graduate, you have an exhibition as a textile designer. What I remember about that is that put up my exhibition, and left to go and get my passport sorted out. And my friend in the cubicle next to me sold work from the exhibition in my absence. She's such a nice person. Some Japanese man asked to buy my work, and this was work that I was trying to discard or throw away because it didn't fit in with the exhibition colors. So that's what I remember about that, because
What?
my
Sorry, sorry,
I was
Leslie.
just going to say because my teachers and lecturers weren't as supportive as they could have been, but the fact that I sold work off the walls of the exhibition, and it was just the end of course exhibition. So I remember that, yeah.
What drew you to textiles and what do you enjoy about designing them?
Well, what drew me to textiles is the functionality of it. It's not just like fashion, which is very tempestuous and changing, that you could produce furnishings, rugs, table mats. Basically, it's multifunctional. It's art with a function, and I belong to that old-fashioned school of thinking, how could you just do these paintings and you're not going to get anything out of them? You know, best to apply it to something that when I returned to Guyana, which I'd hoped to do at the time, that could be functional. And incidentally, I did return to Guyana and I did do work for the Sonata Textile Mill.
And in the chat room, Kim said, the black woman is very powerful if she remembers who she is. And Gail said, interesting conversation.
Thank you.
You're
Kim
welcome.
and Jill.
Leslie, where do you draw your inspirations?
All around me, but you see, I've always been able to see what was quite amazing or strangely discomforting about my experiences in Britain is that I see patterns in cracks in the pavement or in the barks of the trees, and I see. I mean, because apart from living in Zambia for less than a year and visiting West Africa, my world is created by me inside of my head.
I say.
So it's very much looking at the stuff around you and seeing patterns in them, really.
How in your opinion, being an artist, a textile designer, help you grow as a young woman and as a black woman?
Well, it helped me grow because it gave me confidence and opportunities. As a black woman, it taught me that we really do need our own networks
Hmm.
and our own financial clout because though I sold designs through agents in Britain with a great deal of effort, I was really successful when I went to West Africa later on in the 80s to sell work. And that there is where I did best, I feel.
And, and,
That's
and,
a very good market.
and talking about community, you spoke about your friend, is it Betty or Becky?
Betty.
Betty, and,
Sorry.
and others, that you formed this group who back then you didn't realize would have turned out to be accomplished or renowned artists. But tell us a little bit about that community of women. What did it, how did it feed your spirit, or how did it feed your spirits, all of you? What do you believe came out of that formation, that group?
Well, the friends you make, your community, be it the church or your school or your carnival band, they sustain you even now. I'm still in contact with Betty. I'm very close friends with Debbie Eno, who has her own carnival band, which grew out of our carnival band. So first it was Sukiya, then Lion Youth, then it's Kumba. I'm close friends with Shola Williams and all the original people from the carnival band.
Do you give talks or run workshops or classes? If so, where can readers find information about these?
Hold on a minute. At the moment, I actually tutor 2 days a week at a college near where I'm based. So that's to a sort of sixth form college.
Oh, and where can they find information about?
It's very difficult
Oh, okay.
because I'm working with institutions that are already set up.
Oh, I see.
But when I did give workshops in the past, and when I do give workshops, obviously these will be publicized, and these days they'll be publicized in the way things are publicized through social media now, aren't they?
Yes, that's true. Leslie, I want to take a break,
Okay.
but I want to ask you this question before. What still surprises you about yourself as an artist?
My ability to improvise.
Okay, let's take a break.
Okay.
We are back with the lovely Leslie Will Sankofa. Leslie, what piece of equipment, let's try this, what piece of equipment or tool could you not live without?
I don't think I could live without my A3 sketchbook, my visual document book. This is where I record all my ideas almost nightly. I don't think I could live without that. Can you hear?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yes. So I have visual document books which I collage, draw, or keep a record of how things look in the media and ideas that I'm dealing with. I couldn't live without that.
I'm going to shift to the chat room to read some of the comments. Mignon said, very interesting. I am enjoying this immensely. Susie said, nice to listen to someone I actually know. It has been most interesting. Mignon said, Bishop's 1964 representing. Jillian, I am enjoying this. Remember the days in London when I loved her blue and orange textile pieces. Mignon said, some of us were lucky to attend one of her exhibitions in 1996 while we were in London for BHS reunion. And Gail said, I am yet to own one of those colorful pieces for my wall. Please tell us what challenges you overcame as an artist that you're most proud.
Well, the challenges I overcame were basically the temptation to submerge myself into the dominant mainstream culture and not keep pursuing my own dreams or ideas.
I want to go back a little bit in your timeline because I'm just curious about this. You left Guyana and you lived a little bit for a while in Zambia, East Africa. How would you describe the Leslie that migrated to Africa from Guyana to the Leslie that migrated from Africa?
Well,
did Africa change you in any way?
Traveling to Zambia from Guyana was, as a teenager, was a new experience and very dramatic. As anybody who's been to Africa the first time would tell you, the discovery that Africa could be cold. Wow. East Africa can be cold. They live on a plateau. We would need coats, and we did. Cold in the shade, we needed coats sometimes. The food was different, obviously, and the people were lovely. And it was just a different territory. And it's the first time you're coming out of your small nurturing community in Guyana into a wider community. But it was all good. It was quite interesting. But having to leave the family home in Zambia and come to London was more of an abrupt move because remember in Guyana and Zambia I would have a base of my family and parents, and when I moved to London I moved on my own, ostensibly to go to college, but worked a bit before I went to college. So like everyone else, Julian who rang in, we were in London for the first time on our own, and obviously detached from our communities, and obviously it was slightly more difficult than moving to a hot country, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Did you feel pressured to follow in any of your parents? Well, you mentioned your dad, but especially your mother's footsteps. And if not, why do you think that wasn't the case?
I was, and still am, very pressured. Up to when I was 40, my father was still saying to me, Johnny, you could still do law, you could still do law and keep up the family tradition. My mom's creative too, and there is a lot of pressure from her because parents pressure you. Guyanese parents pressure you, you know her. But we are who we are in defiance of our parents, aren't we?
Yes, of course.
That's how we make our mark, as you probably do. Then
Yes.
eventually we go back to the structures our parents have provided and values, and we use those to protect us, really. But we are who we are in defiance of our parents.
I want to shift gears a little bit. And because I see so many of your childhood friends from high school bishops reflected in the chat room tonight, and one Mignon mentioned Bishop BHS 1964 representing. I'm only venturing here because there's a reunion coming up. But I want to ask you, for those listeners who are non BHS, who do not may not understand the experience, can you tell us what was that like? Why do you believe that there is still this camaraderie today and this closeness? And what can you tell us about that experience in Bishop's High School that lives on to this day?
Well, we weren't aware of it, but it was a very exclusive school with very, very high standards. I remember the motto of the was "Look to your laurels," which sounds a bit Latin and highfalutin, but really look to what you have achieved and you are achieving. And I always remember when I was deciding whether I do something, and you think to yourself, would you have somebody talk about this at your funeral? And then you decide, no, I'm not going to do it. You know? Because you don't want people to talk. You'll only do things that you could be proud of, that people could talk about. That was the kind of school it was, Selwyn. You know that.
Yes, I did. I did. I experienced that.
Yeah. And I want to talk a bit about the 1964 girls because they've been so good in being loyal and ringing in and so on. They were extremely good artists in that year. Carol Mignon is an excellent artist. Susie, they
Hold
loved
on.
art.
Back up. Did you say Mignon an excellent artist?
Yeah, Carol Bowling, Mignon Hines,
I never knew.
Theo's
I never knew
points
that.
out to me. They were excellent conventional artists.
I never
In
knew that.
fact, well, you know now. I'm telling you.
Oh.
Eve Drayton, Tiny Austin. I can call about 12 people who were perhaps better artists than I was. But looking back at what you talked about, my exposure in Africa, and my exposure through my mother and Miss Bujayton to Brazil, what I suppose I must feel privileged about is that I got the opportunity to perceive or pursue what I liked. Some people didn't have those options. But I must say, I came out of a year that had highly gifted people.
Wow. Wow. I'm
I hope I
humbled.
haven't forgotten anybody. Bridget, Margaret Jardim.
What is your fondest memory of your parents as a child?
I suppose dancing at New Year's Eve
Hmm.
when we had a house party. You know, you see these programs, these clips sometimes on Facebook of people doing like a wedding dance that they've prepared. I remember my mother and father had a little set piece they would perform to their close friends on a New Year's Eve. And, you know, that was nice. Bit of Ginger Rogers-y, that sort of thing.
If there's a particular religious or spiritual compass or a set of principles that help to guide you through each day, can you share a few with us?
Now, Selwyn, this is very difficult.
Okay.
Uh,
We,
my
we,
husband is a Osirian and he meditates.
hmm.
I don't let him know, but he does have a strong influence on me. So when I get up in the morning and I go to the bathroom, I shut the door and I meditate, but I don't let him know that he's having any influence on me.
I see. Looking back, Leslie, if you had a chance to change anything about your education or your approach to life, what would you change, if anything?
I may have emigrated to America rather than stayed in Britain as I have done. Every time I visit America, it seems so vibrant and healthy. And, our Guyanese community is very, very strong in places like Brooklyn and Atlanta. And I always feel I belong here. I shouldn't stay in Britain. But, my aunts in America say, no, the people in Britain are better off. The Guyanese there. I don't know. I miss the Guyanese community in America.
Talking about meditation, what kind of music calms you down?
Kind of music calms me down. A mixture.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. A mixture of music. We have an old LP from the Guyanese male voice choir that's very good.
I see. I want to try an hypothetical with you, and you could choose any place in the world. If it's a very hot day, and you could choose a favorite place to go and, if I may use a colloquialism, chill out, but just relax and listen to some music, sip something, one of your favorite drinks, and read a book. Where would this place be? What will you be sipping? What music will you be listening to? I think you just mentioned that, but you can try something else. What music will you be listening to, and what will you be reading?
I'll be reading a book by Walter Mosley.
Uh-huh.
It's a difficult toss-up between Grenada on the beach or Splashmans in Guyana.
Huh.
Difficult. Yeah, I can't decide which.
Yeah.
Definitely rum. Definitely
Any particular brand?
10-year-old. Except rum. Let's see. So we've got the rum, we've got the Mosley book, we've got Grenada. Tobago's pretty good as well.
Mm-hmm.
But I hear Splashmans is very good, and I must really keep up the Guyanese theme here. Yeah, that's what I love to do.
Leslie, let's take a very quick break. We are back with the lovely Leslie Wells. Leslie, what can you tell us about you that most people do not know that will surprise them? Me?
Don't forget I'm secretive, Selwyn.
Okay. It doesn't have to be anything
What
strange.
secrets will I reveal?
Let's take something in art.
I remember something.
Mhm.
My dream is to have a car with a red roof.
Sorry, your dream is what?
Have a car with a red roof.
Oh.
Red convertible.
Any particular model or type of car?
Yes, I like Saabs. I had a black convertible, and I've got a black Saab now. Like one with a red roof. That sounds really strange, isn't it?
No, not at all. I love Saabs. Do you have the modern type or the older version?
900 SE, modern.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What do you want to know about me? That
No, it's okay. It's fine.
I'm just trying to think. Oh, I couldn't tell you what music I relaxed to because it was somebody like Tor Pre from Grenada. It was sort of calypso, and you'd think, oh, why is she relaxing to calypso? But yeah, I do.
Well, how does art feed your spirit?
Anybody who sees my profile page on Facebook would see that I become possessed by certain type of images, and I can't help myself. I keep posting and reposting things that have a thread or a link. So I would say art possesses me.
If you could go back in time, Leslie, what would you tell the 15-year-old, your 15-year-old self?
15. a long time ago. Gosh, do you have to do maths first?
Sorry?
Well, tell myself. I would tell myself to what we tell ourselves now. Do whatever you have to do to the best of your ability.
What is what is the least helpful advice someone has ever given you, and how did that motivate you?
The least helpful advice. Oh yes. Remember when I was going to art college, a visiting lecturer from the Royal College said to me, "You will never be able to draw and paint." Would you believe that?
Oh my gosh! And how did that motivate you?
I thought she was crazy. But what she meant is that don't you dare apply to go to the Royal College. Or I don't like what you're doing. I kept doing what I was doing, and I was very, very cheered to see about 10 years ago that when my work was archived at the it's oh my what's the name of that museum? We've got a very important museum here, but my work's in the archive. Her work was listed just before mine. So she spent so much time distancing herself from me. The Victoria and Albert Museum has archived a design of mine that I did in my early days when I just left college. And they had also archived hers because she was a lecturer at the Royal College of Art. So she was in the same category as me, and she spent so much time distancing herself from me, and she couldn't avoid it. I was viewed on the same level as she was. I thought that was very interesting.
If you have a favorite hobby, what will it be?
A hobby.
Hmm.
All my hobbies are my life. What's my favorite hobby? All my hobbies, I live my hobbies. What would be my favorite hobby?
Or let's try it this way. What do you do for fun?
I love going to films, but that's the visual culture as well. Going to see films, good movies. I like eating lovely food. My husband's a brilliant cook, and I love Guyanese food. Oh, yeah,
What are you
yeah.
what are you most proud of?
What am I most proud of? I'm proud of my ability to constantly reinvent myself.
Hmm. And what are you most thankful for?
Well, I'm thankful for who I am, how lucky we all are, Guyanese in the diaspora, to have the confidence that we have and to use the skills and the, I should say, formulas or formats that we've been taught to survive.
What is gratifying about being Leslie Wills Sankofa?
To be all of it, to just everything.
And are you working on any current projects?
Yes, currently I'm developing a plus size collection or a plus size business based upon uh, the needs of cultural women. Uh, it's half based on about American stylist idea of helping people to shop for special occasions and to choose their wardrobes, and half based on the recognition that black people have always celebrated women's bigness. As you know, in Guyana, used to say when we were teenagers, "You're thick." The girl thick. It's really funny. But we've always celebrated it, and we don't need Kim Kardashian and Nicki Minaj to come along with their injected thighs and bottoms to show off how to be big. We've always appealed to men because of our sizes, and in fact, it is the way we look that cause Western society on the whole to develop this culture of injecting their lips, their tits or breasts, and their hips. So we must own this. African women were first and are first, and we must own it and not have it be packaged and repackaged for us. We must make sure we do the packaging.
I like that. Can you describe one of your most gratifying artistic experiences or expressions?
Well, my most gratifying time when I sort of felt really happy was having gone through that 17-year phase of being involved as a carnival designer. I became a judge at Notting Hill, and one year I was a moderator. And I remember on stage as a moderator, the bands coming up across the stage, presenting their best ideas, their king and their queen and their group. And remember, Selwyn, they perform then because they want to come first. And of course, they perform especially for the judge or the chief moderator because it's a competition. And I remember as I saw bands of black people dressed in their costumes and ideas coming up towards me, thinking this must have been like Shaka Zulu and his warriors conquering the land. Because right now at Notting Hill, there's over 1 million people there. And in terms of art and artistry, the carnival band actually the only group that represents black art. So that moment, or the moment, and I've been a judge and a moderator for 6 or 7 years, the moments when they come up towards you and they present or they encapsulate their theme and they dance for you specially, you feel as if you're in heaven as an artist, because you then have the power to decide which form of art you would want to reward most. And, you know, bikinis and glitter art and shiny art are fine, but art that reflects who we are, not just as black people, because they're Chinese performers and performers from all over the world of Notting Hill. There's a Farrakhan group of black Muslims and so on. And you just feel this is the most perfect representation of black art there is. And those are the moments when I felt really fulfilled as a person and artist.
Leslie in the chat room did not attend BHS said, quite an enjoyable guest. I appreciate learning more about her. Leslie, I'm going to ask you to put on your teaching cap for a little bit. And as an African woman, a black woman, if you were in the presence of, or I should say it this way, if a group of young ladies, teenagers, were in your presence and you had to tell them a little bit about being a woman, about the black woman, an African woman, what would you say?
Very difficult. Just live your life. I'm just trying to think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's quite important to stress something we discussed earlier on, that black women are basically the repositories of culture and creativity.
Mm-hmm.
So I would stress that in many ways. But you know, with young people, you don't tell them or lecture them, you show them or you empower them.
I see. And the last question, which I ask all my guests, what makes you laugh out loud?
What makes me laugh out loud? Humor.
What?
The incongruous. I'm just trying to think about something I might have seen that made me laugh recently. I watch old television programs, like in England, something like the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air that you guys would take for granted.
Mm-hmm.
I quite enjoy, older made television programs, which are not necessarily based on real life, because of course the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air with the father as a doctor, it doesn't actually represent everyday life in a black family. But you must remember that sort of program is rare in Britain, and I find that funny. The way No Problem and the way the Guyanese soaps of entertaining as well. So some television is very, very funny.
Well, Leslie, time is upon us, and I want to take this opportunity to say to you, thank you very much for staying up so late. I think some of our audience do not realize that you are in England and 5 hours ahead of us here in New York. So thank you so much for making such a sacrifice and a commitment. I appreciate that. And I can tell by the activity in the chat room that our audience really enjoyed you. Thank you so much.
Thank you too, Selwyn, and it was a pleasure speaking to you. And I look forward to meeting you in the flesh in the near future.
Of course, I will be at the reunion. So good night, Leslie.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.